Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In the Navy, being in an audience like this, I don't actually feel like a fish out of water, if you'll pardon the pun. I spoke, as the Director General of Defence Force Recruiting, I spoke at a conference of chartered accountants here in Melbourne, in fact in this theatre quite some time ago. And I followed Mao's last dancer. I don't know if you recall. And he left the stage with a prominent photograph of him like this, in his best outfit, and I struggled to really think how I was going to gain the audience attention after something like that. So I've learned a few lessons. I'm hoping today to give you, briefly, because I'm very much aware I'm on a timeline here, a brief overview of what Navy has done and why Navy has done it. And then we'll get into the research, and hopefully that will provide a very suitable platform for the rest of the conference. Clearly, when I thought about the conference theme, culture is the answer, so what is the question? Immediately I thought of Douglas Adams, and the answer being 42, therefore what was the question? And I wonder how many of you here actually know what the question was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. My research officer did prepare several hundred PowerPoint slides to be able to show this, and also a moderately sized thesis. But don't panic, I don't intend to say all of it. I'll cut it down to those issues that are relevant today. And there are 3 points I'd like to make. Firstly, Navy is very proud of its cultural reform program. We call it New Generation Navy. It has been very successful for us, and it is of great benefit for Navy. Secondly, Navy will continue its reform journey, and it won't come as a surprise to many of you. We've been doing this now for about 5 years, and it will take longer. This is my second reform program I've been involved with within Navy. I did one once revolving around aviation, and that took 7 years. Thirdly, Navy's cultural reform journey is necessary for our success as a military organisation, and that might seem odd because this is a soft, fluffy issue, but it's not. It's critical for what we do. While our ships and our aircraft are the most visible assets, and impressive as they are, our edge, our military advantage, is achieved through the quality of our people. General Patton once said, "You fight wars with technology, but you win wars with people." I'll start by giving you a bit of a background on the Royal Australian Navy, and I do think this is necessary to give you a feel for the scale of the task of cultural reform that we have to go through and why we are pleased with what we've achieved to date. Since Federation in 1901, the Royal Australian Navy has provided maritime forces to defend Australia and protect our national interests. We are a fighting service, a combat organisation, and our mission is to fight and win at sea. But Navy, like all military organisations, is a complex mix of modern technology and much older traditions. And there is a quaint one that I like, is that naval officers don't stand when we toast the Queen, we sit. Because in the olden days of sailing ship, if you stood, you hit your head. We still follow that. Navy can be a very conservative, surprisingly, to some, and seemingly dogmatic, but we are because we value the hard-won experience that we've found in dangerous combat operations. And we can be very progressive and flexible because, again, we have to be to bring that decisive edge in combat capability that leads to military success. It's knowing how to reconcile these two things, which are apparently contradictory, but it is the constant challenge. But it is what we must do because both technology and the geopolitical factors that we work in can change rapidly. Who would have thought about Ukraine about 3 months ago? We cannot stand still. We must be constantly looking forward and developing our people and our organisation to deal with the challenges of today and be prepared for those of tomorrow. At the moment, Navy is in the midst of a generational change in terms of modernisation of our capability and the technology to support it. From this year, 2014, through to the end of this decade, Navy will introduce a number of new ships and aircraft. The scale and type of these new platforms make them quite significant advances to what we currently have in service. These are 2 large amphibious ships. We call them landing helicopter dock. I have to change the name, but they look like aircraft carriers. These are the largest ships that the Royal Australian Navy in its 100-year history has ever operated. And ironically, they're both here in Melbourne at the moment. The first of these, HMAS Canberra, will be commissioned into the Navy later on this year. It will be followed by a new class of guided missile destroyers, which we are building far more slowly than I would like, but in Adelaide at the moment. And these vessels are very advanced and several new systems in them will place great advances on technology that our people have to integrate into service. Concurrently, we're bringing from the US a new helicopter back to Australia called the Seahawk Romeo, which has a variety of sensors and weapons which make them a huge step from their predecessors. And there's more equipment that's coming down the track. But these new ships and aircraft are all about sustaining our capacity to fulfill our mission to fight and win at sea. And although the headline prices for Navy equipment is large, they are expected to be operated for decades to come. And Australia is not alone in being able to afford this expenditure. And as I said earlier, our market edge lies in our people, their skills and their ability. The technology does not operate autonomously. Each capability must be operated by highly competent and intelligent people. And while the technology gets better, that does not translate into a less skilled workforce. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We need to recruit and retain the best from the breadth of Australian society. And when I look back at where we were in 2008, we did not have a stable workforce, and the most likely future projections to meet this new future were not adequate. We faced both recruiting and retention challenges. Our separation rate was in excess of 11%, and we were under strength in many core work groups and rank levels. Bottlenecks in our training pipeline were preventing us from developing the expertise and skills at the rate required to meet future requirements. In part, the high operational tempo for Navy over the previous decade in all of our roles, including counter-piracy, humanitarian aid and border protection operations, had degraded some of our warfighting skills. Our ships, boats, submarines and airframes have been driven hard, and so had our people. Regrettably, through this period, we also suffered some degradation of our safety standards, which had significant consequences in terms of both airworthiness and seaworthiness. On top of all of this, and defence more broadly, we were suffering from reputational issues in the Australian community. We had lost some of the trust and confidence traditionally placed on us by government, and I would argue also by the Australian people. In essence, in late 2008, Navy concluded that it could not simply keep doing what it was doing. We had identified significant concerns around our people, our performance, and our professionalism, and we needed to address all of these. We needed to operate more effectively, more efficiently, and be able to meet the challenges posed by the future fleet whilst maintaining our market edge, that is, the quality of our people. So our question was, how can Navy leaders collectively lead and inspire 14,000 people to better meet the current and future challenges? And our answer was cultural reform. So in 2009, Navy established a major reform of cultural renewal to be known as New Generation Navy, or NGN. NGN is founded on a clear statement of cultural intent: a Navy that is trusted to defend Australia and its interests and be ready to fight and win at sea. A Navy that is proven to deliver seaworthy and mission-ready forces, and a Navy that is diverse and respectful always, where we live our signature behaviours and values every day. The initial strategy in 2009 was shaped around 3 pillars: culture, structure and leadership. Through a process of consultation, we identified a number of discrete projects that needed to be addressed, and then we prioritised these projects. They were focused on leadership, our signature behaviours, people-focused work practices, and the training pipeline. And I'll dwell just for a moment on 2 of these: signature behaviours and the leadership program. In particular, our signature behaviours were very important to us, and they still are. In many ways, it's easy to come up with sweeping statements of cultural intent, and they may look good in a brochure. But what we wanted to achieve was practical change across the organisation, how we behaved, both collectively and individually. The introduction of Navy's signature behaviours was a vital part in gaining organisation-wide buy-in to the whole NGN program. The signature behaviours were designed to enable Navy people to truly understand our Navy values and what these look like in terms of everyday behaviour. They were driven through the organisation by a series of facilitated sessions delivered by leaders at the local level. Because of their fundamental importance, we've continued to run additionally locally led programs to embed these, and they are now also part of our initial entry training packages. for both officers and sailors. The message has been strong and consistent. If you cannot align your own values with those of the Navy through adoption of the signature behaviours, then there is simply no place for you in an organisation like this. Turning to our leadership program, there are many views held about military leadership by both those in uniform and those outside, and more prominently those in Hollywood. What we wanted to do through our leadership program was to fundamentally challenge people's existing thinking about leadership. But in doing so, we decided to approach the subject from a philosophical or conceptual approach rather than just a competency-based one. The Navy Leadership Framework is an expression of how the values of individuals contribute to effective group mission accomplishment. While much of our society focuses on the performance of individuals, it is team performance that really counts. Certainly that is the case in Navy. Individuals are important in how they contribute to the team. We wanted to encourage people to reflect on the effectiveness of their own leadership style and to get them to think and make decisions about their own and their team's behaviour. In my view, empowerment. As a way to more easily understand thinking and behaviour and to provide a language with which to discuss it, Navy introduced the Human Synergistics Circumplex and started using 360-degree feedback for mid-level and senior leaders. I won't test your eyesight on with lots of the circumplex, but suffice to say it has been a very useful graphical representation of some of our measurable behaviours. We use them during our 3-day leadership development workshop, which looks at individual and group behaviour, and the links between leadership and culture, and the responsibilities of the leader to set and change the unit culture. We use case studies to explore ethical decision-making in the context of leader and group behaviour. And to further support achievement of personal change, Navy leaders are given the opportunity to engage an executive coach following their leadership workshop. So between 2010 and 2014, more than 3,000 Navy leaders engaged in their first 3-day leadership development workshop, including receiving the LSI 360 feedback. Shorter versions of the workshops were rolled out to another 4,000 people during the initial entry and career progression training. In 2013, Navy commenced running the second iteration of our 3-day leadership development workshop. And whilst the first workshop was based on or biased towards Navy leaders having an awareness and acceptance of how they fitted into Navy's desired leadership style, the second iteration focuses more on translating this knowledge into action. There is an expectation by me that all Navy leaders will come back to these workshops every 3 years. At every rank through their Navy career, a Navy leader can expect to be challenged to think about their efficiency and their effectiveness in leadership. Through feedback, reflection and action, I expect all Navy leaders to take on the challenge of continual improvement of themselves and their team. In 2012, 3 years into the program, Navy reconsidered the future of this cultural reform. The metrics we were seeing were positive, and 2 things were clear. Firstly, that the program needed to run beyond the initial 5 years, and that, as I said earlier, was not a surprise to me. Secondly, that it would need to evolve to cater for where the Navy was going in 2013, and this is an important point about cultural reform. When things change as they do in the environment, in your people, or even in the government, you need to reconsider. The 2013 relaunch of NGM was aimed to deliver 5 essential outcomes. Be ready to fight and win at sea, deliver Navy's agreed capability to government, maintain the confidence of the government and the Australian public, become a more capable and diversely integrated Navy workforce, and successfully reform and continuously improve. This led to the development of 3 Ngn Pillars of warfighting and seaworthiness, improvement and accountability, and values-based, people-centred leadership. Importantly, just as Navy was refreshing NGN, the broader defence organisation was commencing its own cultural reform program known as Pathway to Change. And some of you may realise this resulted from, at the time, what was known as the Skype scandal at ADFA. But for Navy, this was both a positive and a challenge. The positive aspect was that it was broadly mutually supporting. The challenge for Navy was to meet its responsibilities against the broader defence organisation whilst not doing damage to the cultural change program we already had in place. Essentially, we were concerned that if we moved to something new, even one that was consistent, people might say, well, you weren't really serious about the first one. And so the risk was about undoing all the good work that NGN had done to date in the first 3 years. In the end, we convinced the broader defence organisation that both NGN and Pathways to Change were that similar and that NGN could deliver the cultural change for Navy alongside. So how are we doing? Well, we've measured Navy's culture on 3 occasions in recent years, in 2010, 2011 and 2013. And while the Navy-wide data is useful, the most valuable benefits of the culture analysis are at what we call the individual unit level. That is, at ships, at sea, in squadrons, etc. It is here that we can help our leaders and our managers to understand the impact of their decisions and their behaviours. It's here that we can empower them to make changes to affect their own cultural transformation programs. It's the cumulative impact of change at this level that is most effective in achieving Navy-wide cultural transformation. To me, it's a bottom-up approach. So in 2013, we surveyed around 3,000 people across 65 individual ships, business units, both nationally and locally, and debriefed each of these units through individually tailored, facilitated sessions. To further encourage and to assist individual units to take action with the data they receive, Navy now has a small number of culture coaches who work alongside unit command teams to assist them, to identify what and how to create effective local actions. We're also now implementing the new OCI data collection strategy, and we'll hear more about this from Commander Ros Asfalk shortly. So with all the activity and training, what have we actually achieved? A question which must always be kept in mind, because we started out with what we perceived as real problems, and we have spent a lot of real time and a lot of real money addressing them. And so we look for real changes. In assessing how well Navy has answered the exam question to date, we have a number of measures available to us. One of them is the results we get from the OCI OEI data. We have achieved an overall change in all 12 OCI styles towards constructive, with an average shift of 11 percentile points. We see similar and consistent shifts in the OEI outcomes and causal factors data. Furthermore, acceptance of OCI across Navy has been evidenced by individual units now seeking assistance in terms of doing something further with their data, signalling movement from a reactive to a proactive approach to cultural development. But there are other measures that confirm what the OCI and the OEI is telling us. We've made progress in our recruiting and capability challenges. Since 2009, we have delivered improvements in our retention and the size of our trained force. Our separation rate has decreased dramatically, and we have reduced the size of our training force. This means that we have more people in their primary roles ready to meet the needs of government. Over the last 5 years, we have also had a 21% increase in our operational sea days. This is a strong improvement in our operational focus, and this is good. We have improved our people's understanding of their roles, their responsibilities, and their contributions to our mission. The research from Human Synergistics suggests that the most fundamentally important thing in order for people to be motivated in any organisation is to understand what it is the organisation's purpose is about and how they personally contribute to it. This graphic suggests we're doing something right in this regard. We are also making good progress on the standards of behaviour from within our people. People use their NGN in the workplace. And it's here that I really acknowledge the narrative from the general media that would not necessarily be consistent with this statement. I just need to explore this a little further. The first thing I would say about NGN is it was not actually introduced in Navy as a direct response to a specific incident of poor behaviour. But it is certainly true that a healthy and positive culture is the antithesis of poor behaviours. And while I hope I never have to manage that sort of incident, it does make us to be able to argue the case for cultural reform. Some examples. The positive change for us has been reflected in, we have a regular program of testing for alcohol and substance abuse. It's quite necessary, and we've increased that rate over the last couple of years, and yet all the rates for positive tests have decreased significantly. Our reported incidence of unacceptable behaviours has decreased by 23%. And while any incident is unacceptable, it is important to note that this significant improvement over a 5-year period is something that we can tell our people is effective by the work that they have done. Navy also has achieved accreditation as a white ribbon workplace, and we are the largest organisation in Australia to do so. This has been a consistent and welcoming part of our cultural reform. New Generation Navy has given us not only a common goal, it has given us a common language to discuss leadership and behaviour. Navy people are now ready to be involved in a more honest conversation about leadership and ethical behaviour. Collectively, these changes have improved the way we operate, and NGN's success is widely recognised both within Navy and in the general public. However, we need to do more. And here you can see our NGN journey map, which is something we present to our sailors so they understand it's another tool we're trying to describe what is it we set out to do. We must raise our standards further and deliver fully on our seaworthiness obligations and our warfighting capabilities. We need to work harder to improve accountability. In the end, cultural reform is an enduring activity. Our society is always changing, and Navy must evolve with it. We are a national institution, and we must live up to the best standards from across the breadth of Australian society. Competition is fierce for the best people. Australia is a diverse nation, and we want to be able to attract the very best Australians, whatever their background. For this, we need to be an organisation where they can feel successful and comfortable in the environment in which they work. In closing, let me say, this is not about political correctness. It's not about having an organisation where, it is about having an organisation where people are treated decently and that they are respected. To achieve our mission to fight and win at sea, we must fight as a team. And to do this, we must have respect for everyone in that team. We must have a culture that includes, not excludes. A positive, productive culture, aligned with the best and breadth of Australian society, does not happen by itself. It takes positive, conscious effort, and that is something to which Navy is committed. Thank you for your attention.